Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Anchía, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield for a couple of questions?
The gentleman yield for questions.
I do, yes.
Thank you, Representative Capriglione. Wasn't planning to even get up here. I did hear you say something kind of interesting that I just wanted to test with you. You said the Second Amendment was absolute earlier. Do you believe that?
I believe it is a fundamental right given to all American citizens in this country, yes.
Do you believe it's absolute, which were your words on the front mic earlier? Or would you like to clarify that statement?
Of course it's a fundamental right. I hope we can all agree. Maybe we don't all agree on other things, but I hope...
You said absolute. 3 syllables. You used that word. Do you believe that the Second Amendment is absolute?
I think it's in the Constitution and a fundamental right of all.
So you
I don't know
believe
if your
it's
definition
absolute,
of
but you do believe it's a fundamental
I don't know what
right.
you're getting at, but absolutely, I believe that the Second Amendment is a fundamental right of all American citizens.
So you would agree with me then it is not an absolute right and subject to restriction? Or if you didn't take my word for it, maybe you take Justice Scalia's word for it in the Heller case, which was decided in the Supreme Court, that made very, very obvious that the Second Amendment is not an absolute right. Are you familiar with that case?
The Second Amendment, no, I'm not. I'm not a lawyer.
Well, I just want to disabuse anybody of the notion, especially when one stands up and says that the Second Amendment is an absolute right, that the Supreme Court has ruled, even very recently in the Heller case, that it is not an absolute right and subject to reasonable restrictions. I want to go back to the First Amendment because you also said something interesting about the law.
Representative, if I can just interrupt you for a second. This bill is not about, relitigating the court case you just mentioned. It's not about whether or not you and I disagree on why or if citizens of Texas should have the right to bear arms. What this amendment is about is simply saying, regardless of your position and the difference between maybe yours and mine, what this bill is about is saying that if you are an entity that primarily receives a lot of benefits from the public and, quite frankly, a lot of benefits from the government, that those shall support and defend
with respect,
the U.S. Constitution.
I know what the bill does. I was just trying to probe your statement on the front mic that the Second Amendment was absolute, because that is a fundamental misstatement, even in the wildest interpretations of the Second Amendment, that would be held by no court in this country. And so when you say at the front mic that the Second Amendment is absolute, I got interested in that and wanted to probe that with you in light of what constitutional jurisprudence is and the state of the law is in the United States today. Because when you say that from the front mic, it provides some intent as to your frame of mind when you bring this bill to the floor. And so I also want to ask you, because I know what the bill says, I'm trying to get at your intent. The First Amendment, you said earlier that companies don't have First Amendment rights. Do you remember saying that in your dialogue? You also know that that is not the correct state of the law after post-Citizens United case, correct? Where the Supreme Court, also a Republican-appointed majority, said that that corporations do have First Amendment rights.
Let me ask you. So you had just, if we're going to probe and not really talk about this bill and not talk about this amendment.
I'm trying to probe at what your intent is, because you've made a couple of different misstatements on the state of jurisprudence in America.
Do you agree with how Scalia and other justices on that court approved of the Citizens United case?
I think the Citizens United case is troubling, but it is the state, whether I agree or not, Representative Capriglione, it happens to be the state of the law in the United States. And so, yeah, I heard from the front mic that you were taking issue with the state of the law and actually misstating it. So I wanted to make sure that we corrected the record.
And again, with all respect, Mr. Chairman, what I heard is that you agree with Scalia on one ruling,
is it your position in this bill that you can say positive things about ammunition and firearms, you cannot say negative things if you're a company?
People can say whatever they want under this bill. This is not restricted.
If companies take policy positions
They
where
can take policy positions
that they
if
do not want
this
to
bill does not.
they do not want to do business with ammunition or firearms. That is a form of speech. Would you agree?
This is not a bill that says a company cannot have a policy position, and it doesn't. What it says is you can't have a policy position and expect to get taxpayer dollars.
So you will be punished for
Not punished.
You're
not being
you will
punished.
be punished by
You're not being punished at
being
all.
unable
There's
to
no
do business with
penalty.
the state of Texas if you have a policy position, and so you're favoring one speech on this over another speech or policy position as an extension of speech. Is that right? You're saying you can do business if you have this idea, you can't do business if you have this idea, right?
I would think that at some point we could agree that there's certain speech that if a company gives outside of this legislation, nothing to do with firearms, but I hope we can agree that there's certain discriminatory speech.
Agreed.
That if a company takes, or if a position that they take is discriminatory, I hope that you and I would agree that there's already rules in place, laws in place that say that the government shouldn't support,
and the
shouldn't provide.
follow-up question to that statement, Mr. Capriglione, is are guns and ammunition a protected class under the law? And they are not.
But the fundamental part of your argument is
because discrimination happens against people who are in a protected class under the law.
Taxpayer dollars.
Is that not right?
I think you agree with me, right? I think you agree with me that there are certain things that a company may have as its policy that should relegate them to not having taxpayer dollars. Do we agree on that?
Against protected classes under the law, you are absolutely correct, and we're in violent agreement.
I would say that the Second Amendment is a protected.
The Second Amendment is not a protected class of people, sir. That is a misstatement of the law.
It is. I didn't say protected class of people. I said it was protected.
That is your third misstatement of the law in this bill layout, sir.
I just because you say it's a mistake, it's not.
Thank you.